Hello and welcome to AIDS 2024 Day in Review, brought to you by Plus Life and Gilead Sciences. I'm Carl Schmidt. We are coming to you from Munich, Germany, famed for its centuries-old buildings, museums, and of course Oktoberfest, but that's not what we're here for. All week, we'll bring you the top breaking science and community news, as well as exclusive conversations and discussions from the very best determined to end AIDS. Now, it may be day one of the official conference, but that doesn't mean we weren't busy all weekend long covering the various pre-conferences and events taking place right here in Munich. I'll have that for you in just a moment. And later, I'll be joined by the World Health Organization's Meg Doherty to catch up on the very latest from the WHO. I'm also going to be chatting with Florence Rieko-Annan from the Global Network of People Living with HIV. But first, here's a look at just some of the events that took place over the weekend.
Living 2024, a pre-conference for people living with HIV, took place on Saturday, setting the tone of what's to come with a special focus on undetectable equals untransmittable, or U equals U.
Because it's about people, in particular people living with HIV. So it's important that it is framed, it is communicated by people who know the meaning of the message, people that will be able to unpack and simplify the message, most importantly.
The International Indigenous Peoples HIV/AIDS pre-conference also took place. Now in its 10th year, the conference aimed to illuminate Indigenous issues and celebrate the profound diversity of Indigenous peoples.
Be proud of who we are. Say and keep to our truths. Talk to our truths. Talk to our honour. Be the Indigenous person that we were supposed to be and that we are. And get our voices heard across the world.
200 trans and gender diverse activists gathered for the Unite, Advocate, Thrive Global Trans Pre-Conference with the hopes of addressing the notable lack of trans and gender diverse specific and inclusive global strategies, particularly in the global HIV response.
Conference, the Unite, Advocate, Thrive Conference, is about bringing gender diverse communities from all over the world. We are coming together to strategize and design a roadmap looking forward in the next years.
Why is curing HIV so complex? And where do we stand with funding HIV cure research? These were just two of the questions being addressed at a pre-conference focused on creating an enabling environment for research and advocacy.
HIV is quite a complicated disease. And it's a complicated disease because the virus plays tricks with us. It is very well capable of circumventing all the defense mechanisms that we have in our body. And hence it's not so easy to come up with the right answer to get rid of the virus. Yes, we can inhibit the virus. We do have the tools. We can prevent people from being infected with the virus, but once the virus is there, the only thing we can do is keep it quiet, but we cannot kick it out.
And on a community level, a panel discussion of models of care for people aging with HIV took place in the Global Village, the heart of AIDS 2024.
As a woman living with HIV, I'm very conscious that we face intersecting forms of stigma, discrimination and disadvantage, particularly those of us who are growing older with HIV. And we need to recognise that there are inequalities both between and within countries. What we need now is significant action. We can't wait anymore. We need joined up care. We need people living with HIV to be believed when we speak about our pain, when we speak about our health issues.
So as you can see, there has already been a lot going on here at AIDS 2024, and that has all been before day one. Now each day we'll bring you a discussion with the very best in HIV and AIDS. My guest today is Meg Doherty. Meg is the director of the Department of Global HIV, Hepatitis and Sexually Transmitted Infections Programs at the World Health Organization. And I caught up with her over the weekend. Meg Doherty, lovely to see you again.
Very nice to see you as well.
Here we are at another AIDS conference. Why are conferences like AIDS 2024 so important?
Well, I think the first day of the conference, the pre-conference, how many people we meet, the interactions, the human element of the work that we are doing in HIV, I think that can't be said more importantly, that it's the heart of the work that we do, that at least for WHO and for many of the people who've been working in the HIV/AIDS fields for so long, it's about, serving people and ensuring people have the best quality of life. And so when we reconnect at these meetings, we hear about the science, we hear about the policies, but we also hear about what's happening in countries and what people need. And so I think that's the important piece for me when I come to these meetings, to reconnect.
We are not far away from 2030. We are all talking about it here. The targets. How confident are you that we can actually achieve them, Meg?
Well, I'm really happy to see that we have more countries that are reaching the 95, 95, 95 targets. So that's a huge push and lift. And when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals 3.3, the response to HIV is probably the most impressive. So it's been impressive. I also believe we have to do much more for the countries who have not reached those targets. And of course, we can't end AIDS as a public health threat without reaching those targets for every population in every country. So we will have more work to do. I think we're going to be very close in certain places of the world, and we'll have to keep pressing and having a very strong post-2030 agenda, especially for countries who have not done as much as those countries who have reached more closer to the 95, 95, 95 targets. I think we'll hear from a report that will come out, I think tomorrow, that we're stalling, and we need to take that stall very seriously like we do in any other health area and redouble our efforts and try to look exactly at why we're stalling. Where are the problems? Why do we still have too many new infections? Why do we have too many deaths? Where are these happening? And are we taking those interventions that we know what to do and how to do them and applying them in the places and for the people who need them?
What can you share about the WHO's guidance on policy and practices for controlling and eliminating diseases?
So WHO has several different guidelines and documents around control and elimination. One area where WHO has sort of taken the lead has been around something we call multi-disease elimination. And that's how can we look across the board at all the diseases that are either on a pathway for control, for elimination or eradication. And the example of eradication, as we all know, is smallpox. So that's something that WHO bread and butter work. But in particular in the work that we do, we focus on the mother-to-child transmission or vertical transmission elimination. And with that, we have expanded from HIV and syphilis to HIV, syphilis, and hepatitis B. We have very strong guidance for countries, and we have now a pipeline of countries who are submitting dossiers to WHO to be validated for the elimination of vertical transmission of HIV, hepatitis B, and syphilis. This year we had the first country from Africa, Namibia, submit a full dossier. 2 years ago we had Botswana certified for elimination, for being on the path to elimination, and we now have 19 countries.
What do you hope the impact is, and especially with practices towards control and elimination of these diseases?
Well, I think for us, we have lots of new guidelines out. I mean,
Yes,
we do. This time around, we've brought a number because we are now representing both hepatitis and sexually transmitted infections. But at this meeting, we've brought forward new guidance around PEP. So how do we use pre-exposure and post-exposure prophylaxis more effectively, so PEP to PrEP? How do we use HIV self-testing in the PEP to PrEP space so that this is something that can be done more easily? How do we ensure that this can be delivered in communities? So I think having a more community-owned self-care approach to prevention is what we're bringing in. Some of our guidelines will help us with getting towards the elimination, especially the reduction of new infections. And we have other recommendations around new treatments for sexually transmitted infections and diseases. But I think we also are bringing forward a policy brief, which we hope, 2 of them, that we hope could be helpful around this person-centered care issue. One about how to address stigma and discrimination in the healthcare setting, and another around sort of simple practices for the healthcare worker for re-engagement of people who've fallen out of treatment care or where treatment and care hasn't served a person and try to bring them back in to care.
And I think that ties in nicely. The theme of AIDS 2024 is putting people first. How do you think we should be best prepared for the future when it comes to ending HIV and AIDS?
I think we can't be complacent, and I know that sounds very trite, but if you speak to people who are not engrossed in this world of HIV and the work that many of us have been doing for 30, 40 years, there is a general sense that there are other pressing health needs. There are other pressing world needs. So I think advocacy is so important at this point in time. Voices of people who are living with HIV, continuing to not see it as another's problem, but our general problem that we all have a responsibility for. And I think also ensuring that, it doesn't have to be that AIDS is in isolation or HIV in isolation in healthcare. There should be a person-centered approach, and bringing that person-centered approach into the work that we do, whether it's aging, addressing NCDs, mental health, etc., expanding the learnings and leveraging what's happened so well in the HIV response to expand it to others. So it's sort of a joint work as we move forward, and that HIV can be sort of seen as part of primary care, part of chronic health care, part of quality health care delivery, and not only in isolation. I think that's going to be important as we move forward, and keeping that on the agenda.
Last question for you, because I know time is tight. What's the future of the AIDS movement beyond 2030?
Oh, I wish I had a crystal ball.
What would you like to see? What do you hope?
Yeah, I do believe we're going to have to be clearly listening and positioning the HIV work within broader health agendas, and ensuring that those broader health agendas can benefit from the work that's happened here that's so special. But the other is I think it's very good that many countries in the world are able to have very robust programs and systems that they've developed on their own and are really taking forward. So I would like to see perhaps a way that we're working where we're looking city by city, country by country, how close can we get to our targets? Are we certifying various countries for having eliminated HIV as a public health problem, not HIV, AIDS as a public health problem, or getting to a point where we're not seeing new infections coming forward, and then certifying those countries and having that maintained and building that. So if we can have a few countries coming forward, like for the mother-to-child transmission elimination, that we have some countries who are coming forward and saying we have 10 cities, 5 regions where we are seeing 0 new infections. We'd like to be certified. Now that, I think, is sort of a stepwise space for the 2030 to start to say this country has, practically eliminated or virtually eliminated new infections. Continuing to need to serve people over their lifetime, continuing to need to reduce deaths. But I think that would be what I would hope to see in 2030. And that will be a combination of good high coverage of antiretroviral therapy, good prevention modalities, and then a real robust, programmatic way of ensuring people stay in care and not drop out of care. And that, that might mean about serving all their other needs along with HIV, and not just only HIV-centric work. So it's going to be complex. It's going to be both very focused on reducing new infections, but also holistic in that sort of broader, I would say, horizontal care that needs to happen for the long term.
Meg Doherty, always a pleasure. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for having me, and have a very good conference.
You too.
Bye. Thanks.
Meg is just one of the thousands of people who have dedicated their lives to improving the lives of people just like me, people living with HIV. Someone else who has made it her life's mission to fight for equity and tackle HIV stigma head-on is the co-executive director of the Global Network of People Living with HIV, or GNP+, Florence Rieko Anam. Florence has had an incredibly packed schedule here at the conference already, but was kind enough to make time to have a chat with us. Take a look.
Florence, it's lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too.
Welcome to AIDS 2024.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to learning, sharing, connecting, lots of hugs.
Lots of hugs. Well, let's get started. So the theme of the conference is putting people first. How does the messaging and science behind U equals U put people first?
I believe the message on U equals U puts people first because I think it's one of the first messages that puts people living with HIV at the center of the benefit of the HIV science. we've had sort of somewhat similar messages around treatment as prevention, but it's like using us, people living with HIV, as playing a role in prevention. But U equals U starts with undetectable, which is about me getting undetectable, having a healthy life, and then not transmitting the virus. So it puts the people living with HIV first.
So why do you think that we must really start using the U equals U as a win-win strategy to secure the health rights for people living with HIV?
I think it's by why. Let me start by how first before why. It's for who, who's win-win. And I think when we define who's win-win, it would be easier to know who or how or why. So for people living with HIV, for example, for the longest time, we wake up, we take a pill. Two sometimes. And for many of us, it was told it's because of our children, particularly women. It was because of our children, or so we don't pass the virus to our partners. Rarely for us. This is the first time we are being told why we must take the pill for us. And I think that's the win for us, for our good health. And there's a lot of stories out here of how living and thriving with HIV is possible, leading quality lives is possible. If we show more of that, then we show the win. To governments, people who are investing in the HIV movement, then you spend less on people's health care and health needs that come from people being ill or having opportunistic infections and all these things that then are heavy on the health, public health facilities or public health care system. So I think it's a win-win depending on who. The fact that people don't have it is an inequality issue. And I see there's a lot of resistance of how, certain countries don't have viral load, certain people don't access viral load. But that's not to take away from the message and the science. So the fact that some people don't have viral load needs to be about an inequality issue that then we must address. And for me, these are conversations that need to happen at different places.
What are our community's perspectives on pathways for sustaining impacts on the HIV response?
So the sustainability conversation is happening at different levels. And I've been privileged to sort of engage with it, right, from at the global level with the UNAIDS who are leading it and partners like PEPFAR and Global Fund, but also with our communities who we are asking. I think there's a lot of misinformation about what it is and what the process is like.
Yeah, what is it? What does it mean? I mean, I've got this question on the card and I'm like, I wrote the question and I'm like, I don't even know what this question means. Can you put it in normal human being talk for me?
I'll say it how I think it.
Please.
So we are, I think 4 years or less than to the end of the global goals, which are the goals that are under the strategic development goals or the SDGs. And under there, the HIV goal is to end AIDS as a public health threat. We know now that it's possible to end AIDS as a public health threat.
We have the tools.
We have the tools. We have the inequities that are making it impossible to achieve that, the criminalized environments we are in, the lack of funding for different, and missing out on key populations, for example, and other marginalized populations. But we have the tools and we know we can get there. The epidemic has shifted. It's at a point where we know what to do to get to the dreams that we have, but we know that people living with HIV are going to leave. Actually, I think scientifically they are saying that there will be 50 million of us by 2030, by 2050, either way, whether we do something or not. So these are people who will be here, who will still need treatment, who will need services for aging with HIV and reproductive services, particularly for those who are born with HIV or are now in their 30s and getting into that phase of their lives. So how do we start planning now for accelerating whatever we need to accelerate to get to 2030 and try as much as possible to achieve that goal? But then what are the plans for 2031 onwards? Because we know we will be there. So to your question at first about what is our role, I think let me use that to say what our role is. Get into these conversations. They're about our lives. The guys who pay for things, the policymakers are doing this with their own different agendas, but that's not our agenda. We will be the ones here in 2031 needing treatment, needing services that are responsive, that are not stigmatizing, that are inclusive, and that are there for everyone. So we must find our ways. There are country conversations happening right now. Countries are developing country sustainability frameworks that will shape largely the next global AIDS strategy in 2026. The PEPFAR COP in 2025, so they will release some information in December, and the next Global Fund replenishment. So it's a small conversation, I think big, but it's happening within a small unit, but it has the capacity to affect a lot of things that affect our lives.
In your mind, what is the U equals U movement's role in ending HIV?
Oh, I love this question. I'll tell you. So, we are no longer in an epidemic that is a threat. That's what the epidemiologists tell us. We are able to end AIDS as a public health threat. So we are not in an emergency anymore. So what place are we in? And that's the place that U equals U is able to take us to. As a place where we start to change the narrative around HIV risk, and the story around HIV. So it's not, oh, be careful about that person. It's, we cannot pass HIV to a sexual partner if the person living with HIV is on treatment, is supported to adhere to this treatment, and is of undetectable viral load. It shifts everything. It takes us into looking at why would a person living with HIV not be on treatment, for example. There are 9 million people not on treatment globally, 500,000 in the US. Who are they? Why? 630,000 people die from AIDS. Why? Who are they and why? And because we would ask these questions knowing there is a solution for them, which is get the treatment, you lead quality lives. But ultimately, if the goal is to end HIV infections, it has to somewhat be contributed to the fact that people living with HIV are all in a format or way, shape or form not able to pass on the virus.
Florence, you and the team do an amazing job at getting that U equals U message. Thank you for making the time to chat with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for giving me the time.
Florence really is a trailblazer in the U equals U movement, and it was inspiring to be in her company. Now, speaking of inspiring, we will have more for you tomorrow from AIDS 2024, including a discussion with Danielle Campbell from AIDS Clinical Trials Group and Lillian Morocco on putting people first, person-centered HIV care. And you won't want to miss my one-on-one with Philippe Regato from Gilead Sciences. Remember, you can like, follow and share Plus Life at Plus Life Media across socials, and be sure to share your thoughts using the hashtag AIDS 2024 Plus Life. We'll be back at the same time, same place tomorrow. See you then.